So I managed to just go 5-0 for the second time in this Chaos Rising build and battle mode that they just released on Pokemon TCG Live. Given that, I feel pretty confident playing this mode, and I figured I would make a video explaining how you can win more games in it. And at this point, the last few times I've played it, I have gone like at least 4-1, and at that point, you get your event ticket back. So it's very beneficial to at least win 4 of your games. I'm going to explain in this video how to win with each of the decks and what specific changes you should make with them, and basically the strategy for this mode, so you can win more games. So there were 4 decks in the mode: Delphox, Goodra, Crobat, and Ampharos. I will first say that you can for sure win with any of these decks. I don't think one is a massive standout over the others, but in my opinion, the Delphox deck is the most powerful, then followed by the Goodra deck, and then followed by the Crobat deck, and I believe the Ampharos deck to be probably the least powerful of all 4 of them, or yeah, overall. But I don't, as I said, I don't think it's that close, and you can for sure, I think it is quite close rather, and you can for sure win with any of these decks, and I'm going to explain how to in this video. Starting with Delphox, as I said, I think it is the most powerful, and it's also one of the 2 decks that I think you shouldn't edit too much. You shouldn't change the cards too much if you happen to get Delphox. Just to explain briefly, how this deck works is you have the main attacker, Delphox, that does 30 damage for all of the energies in play. And then you have this kind of secondary attacker, Ninetales, and the Will-O-the-Wisp 2 for 70 is not so relevant, although it can help to maybe finish off a Pokemon or knock out like a stage 1 or something, or a basic. But the main benefit of Ninetales is this Ninetale transfer, which allows you to move all of the damage counters, usually off a damaged Delphox that maybe has been in the active, onto the opponent's active Pokemon. And that is very synergistic, and I wouldn't want to really, the reason why I don't recommend changing it too much is because I wouldn't want to mess with the consistency of that and kind of get in the way of it. Unlike some of the other decks, with that, I think for the most part you leave it as is, but there's a couple of small changes I'll explain at the end. I would say when you're playing Delphox against Crobat and Ampharos, if you manage to get both of these set up, so a Delphox in the active and then Ninetales, or at least a Vulpix that can become Ninetales next turn on the bench, you've pretty much won against those 2. The reason being is Crobat can only do a maximum of 90 damage per turn. 80 damage for the attack, plus 10 with the poison damage in between turns. And if you have Ninetales and Delphox set up, then you can literally just swing with Delphox, or you can tank a hit with Delphox or Ninetales, and then you can transfer that damage over with Ninetales in the next turn, and you can just keep doing that, and there's really nothing they can do except hope you run out of energy or deck out or something, which if you play it correctly and you don't overuse Delphox's ability, so if you don't discard too much energy and be wasteful with it, that really shouldn't happen. Against the Ampharos, yes, Ampharos can hit for 220 damage with its attack if you manage to match hand sizes, but it's incredibly difficult for them to chain it together 2 turns in a row. And so even if they happen to knock out one of your Delphox, you can come in the next turn and hit them with Ninetales, and it's going to be very hard for them to respond. And then the next turn you hopefully should have another Delphox up, or you can even, if they do attack with something different, then you should be able to move damage using a Ninetales. It's very easy to win those 2 matchups. With the Goodra, it's a bit more difficult, and it depends, because as I'm going to recommend when I talk about the Goodra deck, I recommend making some changes with it. But it's important to recognize that your deck, as the Ninetales player, is the only deck that can accelerate energy. So within your deck, you have the Waitress, which is like, to me, is like the most OP card in this little format, this little pre-release format, because you are able to accelerate energy, which no other deck has access to. And so you can generally be a bit quicker than the Goodra player. Obviously, if they just get a really good start, if they get Rare Candy, if they just start swinging with the Goodra, it's going to be difficult. But oh yeah, and one thing I should say, for all of these decks, you want to go first. You want to try and go first, because you're evolving Pokemon, and it's just beneficial, unless you happen to play a very specific situation where you play like I don't know, a basic EX or whatever. But no, you want to be going first. And with Waitress, it's most important to recognize this if you're a Delphox player playing against another Delphox player, because you need to take into account that they can and will be able to attach 2 energies at least once or twice in the game. So what that means for you in the mirror match is that sometimes it is in your best interest to, instead of attacking with Delphox, if you say have a Delphox that has a couple of energy and maybe you have a third energy on the board, and you could potentially attack for like 120 or 150 damage into their Delphox and leave it very low, it's probably actually in your best interest to not attack, to instead maybe retreat into a Fennekin and just use Call for Family and get some more basics. And to let them knock it out, and then the next turn you can use your own Waitress and accelerate energy, or potentially you won't even have to, and then you can take the KO, the full KO on their Delphox. You don't want to just leave them 150 damage on it, that they're just going to pass back over to you using Ninetales, or potentially they'll be able to get enough energy and then knock out your Delphox. So it's just something to keep in mind, to always be doing the math and take into account that they can get multiple energies down in a turn. And that's what you kind of need to be aware of in the Delphox versus Delphox mirror match. So I said before that with this deck, I wouldn't really recommend editing it. There's a couple of exceptions that I'm going to talk about that kind of apply to all of these decks. I wouldn't add in any of the other kind of different types of Pokemon to the Delphox deck, with the exception of Minccino and Cinccino. If you manage to get one of each of those, then I would add that to pretty much any of these decks, because they are normal type. They can take any, Cinccino can take any energy, and this thing is just OP in this format. It's something you can just set up on the bench, and once it has enough energy on it, they're already having to flip heads just to be able to put damage on it. And you can just stack energy on it and basically just put it in a position where it's like unassailable, basically. The second exception is 2 of the trainer cards. If you manage to get special red card, I would cut 1 of the fire energy for a special red card. If you manage to get Prism Tower, I would cut 1 fire energy for Prism Tower. However, I would say if you got both, or you got multiple of either, I wouldn't cut more than 1 fire energy from this deck, because the fire energies in the Delphox deck are your engine. They fund the attack and also Delphox's ability, and you don't want to run out. Another thing I'll say about this deck, this Energy Recycler, you need to be getting as much value out of it as possible. Do not use it in the early game, because there's a couple of reasons. First, having like too many fire energies around in the early game can actually be an issue, because you want to see other cards, you want to get set up, and they can just clog up your hand. And second, you want to use it at the end of the game to prevent deck outs and to get as much value, to get at least 4, preferably 5 basic energies back into the deck. And then if you have Waitress, you're basically guaranteed to get a second attach that turn. But just generally speaking, you want to wait and use the Energy Recycler as late as possible for those reasons. That's all I have to say about the Delphox deck, which, as I said, I believe to be definitely the most powerful in this build and battle format. So, talking about the Gudra deck, this is, to me, the second most powerful, but it's actually quite close to Delphox. Gudra's attack can knock out any one-hit KO any of the other stage 2s. It's a bit slower because it requires multiple types of energy, and also the retreat cost is quite high. 2 for Gloomy, 3 for Sligo, and 3 for Gudra. But, that being said, it's very powerful, and it's definitely one of the 2 that I would say are more preferable than the other 2 to get the Gudra deck. Unlike the Delphox deck, to me, there is not really a kind of strong engine that I would want to protect in this deck, and I would definitely recommend making specific changes if you get this one. Obviously, there's exceptions in every situation. If you get absolutely nothing from your packs, then maybe you're just gonna play it as is. But what I would specifically cut is this Esper Meowstic line. There's 3 of the Esper and 2 of the Meowstic in the Gudra deck. At the very least, I would cut 1 of the Esper, so it goes down to 2/2. But most likely, depending on what you get, what's available to you, I would cut this whole line. What would I replace it with? Well, Gudra takes Psychic Energy and Water Energy. None of the water type Pokemon really appeal to me in this deck. the Mega Greninja thing, maybe if you got all three. Even still, that's kind of shaky. Like you're probably not getting more than one of each of these. I mean, I've never been in that position, so that's something you could maybe consider. But if you look at the rest of the water type Pokemon, um, if you look at say Golisopod, that is just like a worse version of Goodra, basically. Um, it's like the boundless power thing is like even slower, takes even more energy. The Avalugg, this is an interesting card that I might talk about later. This Iceberg Breaker is really good, but you're not going to, like, you have to just play Avalugg if you get it, so it's not worth it. You have to just set up your whole deck around Avalugg and getting as much water energy to see, so it's not relevant to that. Keldeo just isn't powerful enough, it doesn't do enough. And Octillery is like the only maybe. You could maybe go in that direction. The 2 for 120 is kind of good, and the Jet of Ink thing could buy you some time, but I just wouldn't recommend it. I should say Delibird, I don't recommend it. Even if you get it in the Delphox deck that I just talked about, if you get Delibird, I wouldn't use it. I just don't think it is necessary. It's too niche. You want to be using those turns to set up more in using like Call for Family and stuff, and yeah, I think it could actually harm you as well. It's not like you need that much energy. Like usually you're able to do the math and get enough on its own. Anyway, back to the Goodra deck. What I do recommend replacing this Meowstic line with is some of these Psychic type Pokemon. Specifically, 3 out of the 4 of these Deoxys are really good in this format. This one is good, the Psychic 110 HP Genome Charge Deoxys. This one is good, the Psy Protection Deoxys, and this one is good, the 100 HP Psy Speed Deoxys. Don't use this one, the second one, the 120 HP Deoxys with Psy Spear. 120 damage is an awkward amount in this format because it doesn't KO any of the stage 2s, and you're never going to get 5 energies total on this thing to use the second part where it does 120 damage to a different Pokemon, so just ignore this one. No matter what deck you have, don't use it. This one is handy, it's just a solid attacker. This one is like an auto win if you manage to set it up against, like, none of the stage 2s can damage this if it attacks. So only their supplementary Pokemon, which some of these decks don't even have supplementary Pokemon that don't have abilities. Like the Crobat deck, I don't even know. Like, yes, this thing is weak to Dark, so it's quite kind of could be dangerous to start against the Crobat deck, but if you manage to get this powered up and attacking, I don't even know what Crobat could do against this. And the same kind of goes for Ampharos, because Ampharos' supporter is Emolga. So yeah, this thing is very handy if you manage to get it. And this 4th Deoxys here, this one is good just as a pivot, basically, and early game it can help you get set up. So I would include that in the Goodra deck, the Psy Speed Deoxys with free retreat. The other Psychic type Pokemon I recommend is Phantom Trevenant. If you manage to get like one of each of these, I would use it. Both of these attacks have kind of a niche use. Like, you can slow your opponent down, prevent evolution, and you can also finish Pokemon off with the Overwhelming Pain, like if they have a lot of damage on their side of the board. Yes, I would use one of them. I would use them over Meowstic. And then, of course, if you manage to get Pumpkaboo and Goldgeist EX, I would use them. I would not use Xerneas. It's just underpowered and takes too many energy for what it does. And then the same stuff applies, like if you got Minccino, Cinccino, and those specific trainer cards, I think could be handy in the Goodra deck. If I go back to the deck list, that's basically all I would say in regards to changes with it. And that's basically it. It's like there's not that much to say about Goodra itself. It's just a powerful stage 2 attacker that you want to try and get set up. Oh yeah, one thing to remember, Sligo, the stage 1, has 90 HP, and it can't be one-hit KO'd by any of the other stage 1s. So you can keep that in mind, that this thing can sometimes tank a hit. Even it has free retreat cost, but if you have a switch, you could just leave one in the active and let it tank a hit while you set something up in the background, and then you can switch out. So yeah, that's all I would say with the Goodra deck. It's quite straightforward, but I would recommend making those changes and getting rid of the Meowstic line. Alright, third is the Crobat deck. This one I like a lot, but I think ultimately is kind of underpowered. But I like it because it is a bit more technical for one of these decks. It's kind of fun to play. It's very quick. It doesn't take a lot of energy. And the Grimsley's Move card is very fun to play. It has its own engine, meaning that I wouldn't recommend messing with it too much. And I wouldn't recommend changing the cards in this deck. just the same as I said with the Delphox deck. First, there's like kind of some more niche tips with. Oh yeah, so the Grimsley's move. I would try and use this at any point when you get it. Basically, even if it's early on in the game, um, you have quite good odds of being able to get Crobat down early. And if you manage to do that, then you can just run over the top of the opponent. Like you can get it down before they can even set up or do anything about it. So don't be afraid to try and use it early on. Hold on, I'm going to go back to the actual cards so I can read them in English here. All right, so what I like to do, keeping in mind that Zubat has a free retreat cost, starting the game, if I haven't mentioned it already, you should try and go first with the coin flip for all of these decks, because they all want to evolve, they all prefer to go first. If you start Zubat, then you can retreat for free. I like to put Quillfish out because of its poison point ability, and put the opponent in a kind of awkward spot where they have to choose as to whether they attack Quillfish and they become poisoned. And also this deck has this Punk Helmet is very important. Being able to use both of them in the game can be the difference, because again, the maximum of 80, technically 90 damage from Crobat, if you can get an extra 4 damage counters on the opposing Pokemon, then that can be the difference between being able to one-hit KO them or not. And I like to put if I can, put the first Punk Helmet onto Quillfish and letting them, like it's usually going to be the opponent's basic or stage 1, letting them swing into that and deal with it and take a lot of damage. And then even if they evolve and they say knock out Quillfish, then already they're going to be in range for a Crobat KO most likely. Or at the very least you can put a ton of damage on it with Crobat, and you can poison and confuse them and make it very difficult for them to respond. A thing to keep in mind as well, that there's no gusting, there's no boss's orders, that kind of thing mechanic in this format. So what I also like to do with this deck is sometimes I will try and keep, if I can, I will keep a spare Zubat out as like a pivot card on the bench because it has free retreat. And if I don't know how I'm going to play out a turn, if it depends on what I draw, then I'll just promote the Zubat and kind of just keep it there, as I said, as a kind of pivot. Another kind of synergy to be aware of with this deck is that you do have these kind of draw supporters. You have Urbane, Surfer, and I was Fighting Spirit. And you can use Crobat's ability in the active, and you can choose whatever card you want and then use one of the draw supporters to get it the same turn. Can be very helpful. Usually you want to make sure that if you used your first Punk Helmet on the Quillfish, then you can use your second on the Crobat if it's in your deck, and then you can use the Nighttime Maneuvers plus the draw supporter to get that on Crobat before attacking, and so they have to swing into that and take the extra damage. If you manage to pull the Crocodile EX, then that could be worth playing because of Grimsley's move, and that would be really awesome, but I've not been in that position. But I can imagine that being like a helpful card to add in. And I would also say that maybe if you got the Skrelp and also, where is it? Dragalge, it could be an option for this deck and also the Goodra deck, but probably not because you're including also the Water Energy, but definitely you could go in that direction with the Goodra deck. For this one, though, mainly you just want to kind of focus on that Crobat engine, try and get a quick start, and run over the top of your opponent. The last thing I'll say about the Crobat deck is you need to be very careful not to deck out with this one. It actually did happen to me once. And that is because it gives you a lot of control over what cards you see. So usually you're going to be using Crobat's ability plus a draw supporter. Either you're going to be using the ability to find the draw supporter, or you're going to be using the ability and then the draw supporter to get what you just put on the top of your deck. And you can just run out of cards really quickly. Unlike, for example, the Delphox deck, you have no way to get stuff back out of your discard into your deck, so just be careful about decking out with the Crobat deck. Finally, I'll talk about what I believe to be the weakest deck, the Ampharos deck, although still it has its own way of winning, and with this one is the second that I would recommend making specific changes. Getting rid of the Emolgas is what I recommend doing if you are using the Ampharos deck. they're just not that good. It's really not a helpful card in my opinion. I would get rid of the free Emolgas and I would replace them with something similar to what I recommended with the Gudra deck. There were no other electric type Pokemon, but there are all of these different psychic types. Remember that Ampharos only requires one electric energy in order to attack. And in this deck, starting out, there is, I believe, 11. Yes, 11 um, electric energy. You don't need that, or lightning energy, whatever it's called. You don't need that in this deck. You can get away with like 5 of them to ensure that you have enough for Ampharos' attack. And so if you went in the direction of using the psychic type cards, then you could put a whole 6. That's before removing the Emolga line, and then you can use those extra slots to replace the Emolga line with some psychic type Pokemon if you went in that direction with it. So going back to these psychic type cards, again, I recommend using the Deoxys, the same 3 as before. The 110, 130, 100 HP Deoxys can be helpful, and Phantom Trevenant line, Gorgeist could be helpful in this deck, and that is about it in regards to the changes I would make for the Emolgas and the extra lightning energy. Just remember, again, the Cincino, Mincino are helpful in this, and also those 2 specific trainer cards, Special Red card and also Prism Tower. It's important to remember if you're playing against Crobat, then it has weakness to you as the Ampharos player, and you can one-hit KO their Golbat with your Fluffy. That's important to recognize. You'll do 80 damage to it and knock it out. Against Delphox, specifically with Ampharos, you really should only be using its attack if you could one-hit KO Delphox, because if you don't, you need to make sure they're more than a turn away of using even if they're just more than a turn, like let's say they just have Delphox and they have nothing on their bench, still, if you put 140 damage on it, next turn they can play down their Vulpix, they could play down another Fennekin or whatever the basic Pokemon they can play down, and then they can switch that into the active, stall for a turn, and then the next turn they can return the 140 damage that you did over to your Ampharos. And remember, you can't even attack in the turn in between. So I would recommend against Delphox, if they have Delphox set up, only take the one-hit KO, or just do some chip damage beforehand to get it in range for a one-hit KO with Ampharos if you can't match hand sizes, and just be very careful. That is quite a tough matchup specifically for the Ampharos player. The last thing that I would say, a few alternative strategies with this kind of limited format. I kind of mentioned it before. If you happen to get, let's say, at least 2 Bergmite, preferably free, and 2 Avalugg, then it could be in your interest to just play those 2 of each, and then just play your trainer draw supporters, and then you can kind of stomp with Iceberg Breaker. It's an option because that is really powerful. The Iceberg Breaker, discard the top 6 cards of your deck, and then this attack does 60 damage for each basic water energy you discarded in this way. It's something to keep in mind. That's like one kind of, I guess, alternative strategy that you could play instead of whatever deck. I probably wouldn't do it, but it could be fun. Beedrill might be a good card in this format, but no, I don't think, unless you manage to get 2 of them, I don't think it is relevant in the Build and Battle format. Another alternative kind of strategy, as I mentioned, Mincino, Cincino, and then also the Taurus. If you happen to get like 3 of the Taurus, then you may want to include them in any one of these decks because that is very powerful. But think about it, if you even have 2 of them, that's still hitting for like a maximum of 50 damage, 100 damage, and I don't think it's that powerful. Maybe if you got 3 of them, it might be worth your while to go in that direction. But otherwise, that is my recommendation for each of the decks in the Build and Battle format. And good luck on winning in it.